I moved back home after college to help my mom with bills. Things seemed manageable until my stepdad Brian started acting strange. At first they were small incidents, items misplaced, conversations misremembered. But soon I noticed a pattern forming. Brian was systematically turning my mother against me, planting seeds of doubt about my mental stability. I never imagined the betrayal would culminate in those crushing words and an eviction notice. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment, letting me know where you are tuning in from. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I reclaimed not just my home but my dignity. College had left me with substantial student loans, but I had secured a decent job at a local marketing firm. When my mom lost her position at the healthcare company where she had worked for 15 years, I knew what I needed to do. Moving back to help with the mortgage payments seemed like the responsible choice, even though Brian and I had never really connected since he married my mother 3 years ago. The first few weeks were relatively peaceful. Brian maintained his distance, often working late at his construction management job. My mother appreciated having me around, and we fell into a comfortable routine. I paid my share of bills, helped with groceries, and even fixed up some things around the house that needed attention. The warning signs were subtle at first. My car keys would not be where I had left them. Important mail for me would somehow get misplaced. Brian would casually mention to my mother that I had come home late smelling of alcohol on nights when I had actually been working overtime or had gone straight to bed. During dinner, Brian would make small comments about how disorganized young people were these days, with pointed glances in my direction. When I would try to defend myself, he would quickly backpedal, saying he was not talking about me, specifically making me appear oversensitive. For my mother's sake, I tried to keep the peace. She seemed happy with Brian, and I did not want to create problems in their marriage. But the situation continued to deteriorate in ways I could not ignore. One evening, I noticed that my prescription medication had been moved from where I always kept it. When I mentioned this to my mother, Brian quickly jumped in, suggesting that perhaps I was becoming forgetful, adding that he had noticed other concerning behaviors from me lately. Later that week, I overheard Brian on the phone with someone saying, "The plan is working better than expected." When he realized I could hear him, he quickly changed the subject and gave me a look that sent chills down my spine. Something was definitely wrong. My mother began watching me with concerned eyes. She started asking if I was feeling all right, if work was too stressful, if perhaps I needed to talk to someone professional. It was clear that Brian had been planting seeds of doubt about my mental state, and they were taking root in her mind. Despite the growing tension, I still hoped things would improve. I was saving money to move out eventually, but I did not want to leave my mother alone with Brian, especially as I was beginning to suspect his intentions were not good for either of us. Brian's manipulation tactics grew bolder as weeks passed. He no longer bothered to be subtle about moving my belongings openly, questioning why I could not keep track of my things. He would reorganize items in my room while I was at work, then express concern to my mother about my disorganized state of mind. The gaslighting intensified. Brian would turn off my alarm clock, making me late for work, then tell everyone I was becoming unreliable. He would delete important emails from my laptop when I left it open, causing me to miss deadlines. Each incident was crafted to make me appear increasingly unstable. The neighborhood became another battleground. Brian told neighbors I was going through a difficult phase. Mrs. Patterson from next door stopped inviting me to her Sunday barbecues. Mr. Gonzalez no longer asked for my help with his computer issues. When I walked down the street, I noticed people watching me with a mixture of pity and caution. All the while, Brian played the concerned stepfather perfectly. "I am just worried about Jonathan," he would say, with a convincing frown. "We all need to support him through this troubled time." My mother would nod in agreement, while I stood there feeling increasingly isolated. The impact on my other relationships was devastating. My friend Tyler, who I had known since high school, started acting differently around me. "Are you sure you are okay?" he asked repeatedly, clearly having heard something from someone in the neighborhood. My coworkers noticed my increasing stress levels, with my supervisor pulling me aside to ask if personal problems were affecting my work. I began to doubt myself. Was I really becoming forgetful? Was the stress causing me to act differently without realizing it? The constant questioning of my reality left me exhausted and confused. The situation reached a new level when I discovered my prescription medication had been replaced with similar-looking vitamins. This was not a mistake or my imagination. This was deliberate. When I confronted Brian, he looked shocked and immediately turned to my mother. "See what I was telling you," he said. "Now he is accusing me of tampering with his medication. This is exactly what the doctor warned might happen. What doctor? I had never spoken to any doctor about my mental state." Things escalated further when I found a journal in Brian's desk drawer which he had left conspicuously open. In it, he had documented my supposed unstable behavior, with dates, times, and detailed descriptions, all completely fabricated. There were entries going back months long before he had started his obvious campaign against me. The next day I came home to find the living room in disarray. A broken lamp lay on the floor, along with scattered books and a damaged photo frame containing a picture of my mother and Brian. My mother was in tears while Brian stood with his arm around her, consoling her. "Jonathan, what happened here?" my mother asked, through her tears. "I did not do this," I said immediately, realizing how guilty that made me sound. Brian shook his head sadly. "This denial is part of the problem. I came home and found it like this. The neighbors said they heard shouting coming from the house around the time you came home from work." "That is impossible," I protested. "I just got here now." My attempts to defend myself only made me appear more unstable. The more I denied involvement, the more Brian's fabricated narrative seemed confirmed. My mother's eyes reflected not just sadness but fear, something I had never wanted to see directed at me. Our family dynamics had completely deteriorated. My once close relationship with my mother had been reduced to cautious interactions filled with uncomfortable silences. Extended family members began calling ostensibly to check in, but really to evaluate my mental state based on what they had heard from Brian. Desperate and increasingly isolated, I started keeping my own record documenting Brian's actions, taking photos of my belongings before leaving for work, and even setting up a small camera in my room. I needed proof that I was not crazy, that what was happening was real. The final act in Brian's elaborate plan came on a Friday evening. I returned from work to find my mother and Brian sitting solemnly at the dining table. The atmosphere was heavy with tension. Between them lay an envelope that I recognized as containing the emergency cash my mother kept in her dresser, now empty. "We need to talk, Jonathan," Brian said, his voice grave, but with a hint of something else, something like triumph. My mother could not meet my eyes. "The money is gone, Jonathan. $300. I did not take it," I said immediately. Brian sighed dramatically. "We found this in your room." He pushed forward a bank receipt, showing a deposit of $300 to my account dated that day. It was a forgery, but a convincing one. I had been at work all day, something that could be easily verified, but in the moment, faced with this seemingly concrete evidence, my protests sounded hollow. "We also found these." Brian continued, revealing several pill bottles that were not mine and a small bag of what appeared to be marijuana, which I had never seen before. "Hidden in your closet behind your shoes." My heart raced as I realized the extent of his setup. "You planted those." "I have never seen them before." My mother finally looked at me, her eyes red from crying. "Jonathan, please. This needs to stop. If you need help, we can get you help." "I do not need help," I shouted, my frustration boiling over. "Can you not see what he is doing? He is manipulating you. Manipulating this entire situation." My outburst only seemed to confirm their worst fears. I watched as my mother shrank back, fear evident on her face. Brian put a protective arm around her, playing his role to perfection. "I think we have reached the end of the road here," Brian said, his voice steady and reasonable in contrast to my emotional state. He looked at my mother, who nodded slightly, then back to me. "We cannot have him living here anymore. It is not safe for you, for us." The words hit me like physical blows. My own mother was not defending me. She was agreeing to throw me out of our home, the home I had grown up in, the home I had returned to in order to help her. "Mom," I pleaded, my voice breaking. "Please. You know me. You know I would never do these things." But the seeds of doubt Brian had planted had grown too strong. She wiped tears away and whispered, "I think it would be best if you left, Jonathan, at least until you get the help you need." That night I packed my essential belongings while they watched. Brian maintained his concerned facade, but I caught the flash of satisfaction in his eyes when my mother was not looking. She cried silently, but made no move to stop what was happening. As I carried my bags to the door, the weight of betrayal was almost too much to bear. This was not just losing a place to stay, it was losing my family. My mother, who had once been my closest ally, now looked at me like I was a stranger, someone to be feared rather than loved. "I will call you," she said weakly as I stepped outside. I did not respond. What was there to say? With nowhere else to go, I called the only friend, who might still believe me, David, a college acquaintance, who lived an hour away. He reluctantly agreed to let me stay on his couch for a few days, while I figured things out. As I drove away from the house I had grown up in, I felt utterly alone. Brian had won. He had turned my mother against me and driven me from my home. I had no idea what his ultimate goal was, but he had achieved this part of it completely. The week after being forced out of my home was the lowest point of my life. I slept fitfully on David's uncomfortable couch, waking from nightmares where I was shouting for my mother while she turned away from me. During the day, I moved through work like a ghost, my mind constantly replaying the events, searching for what I could have done differently. David was kind, but clearly uncomfortable with the situation. I could tell he was not entirely sure whether to believe my version of events, or the rumors that had undoubtedly spread through our social circle. "Maybe you should talk to someone professional," he suggested carefully on the third day, echoing what my mother had said. I was beginning to wonder if everyone was right. Maybe I was experiencing some kind of break from reality. The thought terrified me more than anything else. On day 4, I made an appointment with a therapist, Dr. Marshall. I expected more of the same assumptions and concerns, but something unexpected happened. She listened, really listened, as I detailed the events of the past few months. Rather than looking at me with suspicion or pity, she took notes and asked pointed questions. "What you are describing sounds like a systematic campaign of gaslighting," she said when I had finished. "This is a form of psychological manipulation where someone makes another person question their own sanity." For the first time in months, someone believed me. The relief was overwhelming. "But why would he do this?" I asked. "What does he gain by driving me out?" "That is what we need to figure out," Dr. Marshall replied. "People who engage in this kind of behavior usually have clear motivations, often related to control or financial gain." Her words triggered something in my memory. Financial gain. The house. There was something about the house I was forgetting. That evening, as I sorted through the boxes of belongings I had managed to bring with me, I found an old folder of documents my mother had given me years ago for safekeeping. Inside were various important papers, including my birth certificate, social security card, and crucially the deed to our house. I had completely forgotten about this. The house had belonged to my father, who had died when I was 12. He had left it to my mother and me jointly. After his death, my mother had taken over the mortgage payments, and when she remarried, nothing had changed officially with the house ownership. I was still legally co-owner of the property. The next morning I took the documents to a lawyer, Mr. Reeves, who specialized in property law. He confirmed what I suspected: the house legally belonged half to me, and Brian had no claim to it whatsoever, regardless of his marriage to my mother. "If your name is on the deed, and these documents are in order, which they appear to be, then no one can legally evict you from the property without court proceedings," Mr. Reeves explained. "And based on what you have told me, you have grounds for legal action against your stepfather for his behavior." As we talked further, more pieces fell into place. My mother had mentioned months ago that Brian had been pushing to refinance the house to start a business venture. She had been hesitant because the house held sentimental value as my father's legacy. As a co-owner, I would have needed to approve any refinancing or sale, a detail Brian had perhaps discovered and realized was an obstacle to his plans. Mr. Reeves helped me draft legal documents, asserting my property rights, and detailing Brian's campaign of psychological manipulation. We included the evidence I had managed to gather, statements from coworkers, confirming I was at work when some of the incidents allegedly occurred, and even reached out to neighbors who had witnessed Brian's suspicious behavior. The lawyer also helped me prepare eviction papers for Brian. If anyone was going to leave that house, it would be him, not me. 1 week after I had been thrown out, I returned with Mr. Reeves and a courier service. Brian answered the door, his smug expression quickly changing to confusion at the sight of the formal-looking man beside me. "Brian Thomas," the courier said, "formally, you are hereby served with these legal documents regarding property ownership and eviction proceedings." The look on Brian's face as he realized what was happening was something I will never forget, a mixture of shock, anger, and fear. My mother appeared behind him, her eyes widening as she saw me. "Jonathan, what is this?" "The truth, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "The house belongs legally to both of us. Dad left it that way, and I have evidence of everything Brian has been doing to manipulate you and drive me away. We entered the house at my insistence, my legal right as an owner. At the dining room table, the same place where I had been falsely accused and thrown out, Mr. Table. Reeves laid out the documentation showing my ownership rights and explaining the legal consequences of Brian's actions. "This is ridiculous," Brian blustered, but I could see the panic in his eyes. "He is unstable. He needs help." "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone, "I have been recording our interactions for weeks." I played several clips that clearly showed Brian moving my belongings, planting items, and even bragging to someone on the phone about how well his plan was working. My mother listened and watched in horror as the truth unfolded. The Brian she thought she knew, the caring, concerned husband, dissolved before her eyes, replaced by a calculating manipulator who had systematically driven a wedge between mother and son for his own financial gain. "Why?" she asked him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you do this?" Brian had no answer that could justify his actions. His schemes exposed, he retreated into angry denials that only made him appear more guilty. The legal proceedings that followed were straightforward. With clear evidence and property documentation, the court ruled in my favor. Brian was forced to leave the house. My mother, once she understood the full extent of his manipulation, filed for divorce. Rebuilding my relationship with my mother took time. The trust that had been broken could not be repaired overnight. We started with small conversations, careful, and measured, both of us working through our pain with separate therapists. "I should have believed you," she said during one of our early conversations. "I should have known you better than that." He was very convincing, I acknowledged, and he had months to plant those seeds of doubt. Gradually, we established new boundaries and expectations. I moved back into the house, but we maintained our separate spaces in privacy. Family members who had been quick to believe the worst about me were kept at a distance until they had earned back my trust. Through this painful experience, I discovered an inner strength I never knew I possessed. I learned to trust my instincts even when everyone around me doubted them. I found the courage to stand up for myself and the wisdom to know when to seek help. Today, our home is peaceful again. My mother and I have both grown from this experience, painful as it was. I have forgiven her, understanding the powerful influence of psychological manipulation, but I have not forgotten the lesson. Trust must be earned and maintained, even among family. Looking back now, 2 years after those devastating words, we cannot have him living here anymore. I realize how close I came to losing everything: my home, my relationship with my mother, and even my sense of self. The journey back from that edge has taught me lessons I carry every day. I still live in my father's house now, fully mine, after buying out my mother's share when she decided to move to a smaller place closer to her sister. We have dinner together every Sunday, our bond slowly healing with time and honest conversation. As for Brian, I occasionally hear about him through mutual acquaintances. He married again recently. A widow, with substantial property, I am told. I considered warning her, but realized that without experiencing his manipulation firsthand, my warnings would likely sound like the bitter words of a resentful stepson. Instead, I provided his name to a support group for victims of psychological abuse, who maintain a private registry to help others who might search for information. The therapeutic process has been essential to my recovery. Dr. Marshall helped me understand that victims of gaslighting often carry the effects long after the abuse has ended. I still sometimes catch myself doubting my own memories or perceptions, but I have developed tools to ground myself in reality. I have also become more discerning about who I allow into my life. My circle of friends is smaller now, but built on authentic connections and mutual respect. Trust is earned gradually, and I am no longer apologetic about protecting my boundaries. Perhaps the most important lesson I have learned is about resilience. We are all capable of weathering storms we never imagined surviving. The human spirit has remarkable capacity for recovery, especially when we reach out for help and speak our truth, even when others are not ready to hear it. If my story resonates with you, please remember, you are not alone. Have you ever experienced someone trying to manipulate your reality or make you doubt yourself? Share your story in the comments below. It might help someone else recognize the signs before things escalate. If this video helped you understand gaslighting better, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories of overcoming adversity. And if you know someone who might benefit from hearing this, share it with them too. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, trust your instincts. They are often right.